Hello friends, and welcome to another video. Just wanted to do a kind of wrap up for March, beginning of April. I recorded this footage last night, and it is of the first completed test base of Ottoman Turks for the Crimean War, 28mm. These are Wargames Foundry figures, and they are the chaps in march pose wearing coats rather than just in their tunics, as you can see. These figures are an absolute pleasure to paint up. They paint up really quickly. The detail is fantastic. Typical Perry figures in that the detail isn't too deep, it's quite shallow, but the figures paint up really nicely. I favoured sort of a very sort of French palette, so I used some foundry triads that are related to like the deep blue, I think is what it's called. I don't think that's specifically a French uniform color, but I went for that, and then I kind of erred on the side of lightening up the uniforms somewhat, just for a slightly brighter look. So they are quite light blue. I've done this on purpose to differentiate them from the French, who, when I will get around to doing those, will probably be a bit darker in tone. One thing that I had to make some compromises on was the detailing on the uniforms. So the collars are supposed to be red, which they are. I've done that stripe down, that piping down the front. I managed to get that done because there's like a nice line to paint along. I've opted for the winter trouser design, which is dark blue with a red welt down the side. The fez is red. I've just used Foundry Scarlet for all the red, and then the tassel is supposed to be the same blue as the kind of uniform, maybe a bit darker, I'm not sure, but again, to give it a bit of definition, I've opted for a slightly lighter blue, just so that you can actually see the strands of the tassel. Otherwise it just kind of looks black, right? And there's not really any definition to it. Varied the skin tones across the figures, just to kind of give them a sense of the fact that the Ottoman Empire was quite multinational. I'm not happy with the way the skin tone turned out on every single one of the figures. I think the front rank looks better than the rear rank. The rear rank looks a bit kind of sick, but whatever, I'm not going to go back and change that now. The compromise that I mentioned earlier is on the cuffs. So the piping on the cuff is actually, it's supposed to be like, there's supposed to be a bit of blue, then a thin red line, and then the rest of the sleeve moving from the cuff upwards. That's just a nightmare to paint. I'm just not that good, so what I've done is I've just opted to paint the actual cuff itself like in a red line. I think it gives the same kind of general effect, and I'm quite happy with the way that turned out. Now here, what I've done is I've based the figures 8 to a base, because I think that looks good, and what I want to sort of champion here is the idea of a slightly denser base. Oh, there's one more thing about these figures before I get on to the next kind of clip that I want to show you. Is you'll notice that on the white belts I've kind of tried to get a bit of shading where the belts overlap. I seem to have missed that on a few of the figures, certainly in the front rank. Most of them have like a nice black line. What I'll do is I'll actually just go in with a bit of black paint and actually paint in that shadow there, just to accentuate that little overlap piece. Alright, and then the other thing I wanted to show you then was just a comparison side by side. So the one base here is Foundry, the other is Warlord Games' Metal British. There's a couple of things that you'll notice. The British figures are sizably taller than the Foundry figures, which is normal. Scale creep is a thing, and the Foundry range is quite old. The Warlord Games figures have this weird, their legs just don't look right. They kind of look like they're all kind of lurching to the left. I've mentioned that in the previous video about these figures, but the more important thing I think that I want to talk about quickly is the basing standard. So I've mentioned it in the last few videos, but I'm thinking of actually going to a 8 figures per base standing base sorry, 8 figures per stand basing scheme for the British and the Turks. Haven't decided with the French yet, but with the Russians I'll probably stick with 6s, only because again it may vary. I may just look at it and think, you know what, it looks better with more figures, but I like the slightly denser look of the Turkish base, and then also it still allows me to do units of 24, but then 3 bases per unit, which allows me to center the flag neatly. So that base of British there, the guys look a bit spread out. I think what I'm going to end up doing is, and I hate doing this, but I'm going to have to, I think, is pop them off the base, kind of shunt everybody off a bit, well, make enough room for another file of troops. I think there's enough room there. Don't think that's the problem. But I think I'm going to have to just pop them off and try to make some room there. Not ideal, obviously. I wish I'd kind of had this idea earlier, but I just want to make sure that I sort of start as I mean to go on. And the good news is that with the British, I am still in the early phase where I haven't really committed heavily yet. I've only done like 2 bases, one of the Grenadier Guards and one of the line. So it's not going to be a huge job. It's just slightly irritating, right? Because you finish something and you think, okay, I'm done here, and then you've got to go back and fix it. Yeah, I think the bases of 8 look slightly better, just more dense, more packed. The Russians will then be 4 bases, which allows me to create that kind of square look, and the command base at the front will be a wide 120mm base. But I just wanted to kind of show you the difference here. You'll notice that like on the boots of the Turks, they've left them kind of dirty and dusty. I don't bother cleaning up generally unless it's egregious. I kind of leave the sort of splatter from when I do the basing as a kind of natural sort of element of discoloration or muddying that happens on campaign. One thing I really appreciate about these Turkish figures from Foundry is their lack of equipment. They don't carry their backpacks, which I really like, because it just seems to me, and again, it just seems to me that going into combat wearing that massive knapsack is just silly. And the French in particular were quite clever about this. They would typically drop their packs at their kind of last tactical bound before going in the same way that like a modern army, when you're on your final assault, you'll drop your day sack or your Bergen or whatever before you actually advance into combat. It just makes sense, right? You don't want to be encumbered. So I like these Turkish figures who have obviously put their knapsack somewhere safe, hopefully, and then they've gone into combat to go and fight the enemy, and that works for me. So yeah, they look pretty good in their serried ranks. I'm pretty happy with the way they came out. I didn't get a ton done this month. It's mainly just been mop up. As I mentioned, I was on the road a lot, and finally getting some time at home, and trying to make the most of that. So yeah, just wanted to send a quick update and share this with you all. If you have any thoughts or whatever, let me know. As always, I am all ears. Take care.